following program is a peer-to-peer advice show and does not diagnose mental health conditions. If you're seeking social services, please call or text 211 or go to 211.ca. Hello, listeners around the world on radio, streaming, and podcast services. This is It's Not Therapy. I'm Liana and I am not a therapist, but I am your source for navigating the madness of mental health using my top 10 sayings for checking in with your best self. This week, we're revisiting a topic I've talked about before, but I think we need a refresh. Boundaries, specifically setting and enforcing boundaries when it's hard. Top 10 phrase, other people don't have to like your boundaries, but they do have to respect them. Now, my top 10 phrases are reminders to myself, and that one is worded to be catchy instead of totally accurate, because lots of people don't respect boundaries every day. And my top 10 phrase is a reminder to myself to enforce my boundaries even when people get angry at me for having them. Because people get angry when you set a boundary. People get angry when you enforce a boundary. They call you selfish and difficult, and they'll say things like, "Why are you like this?" And that shows you're dealing with people who don't understand boundaries. A boundary, in general terms, is where one thing ends and another begins. Your boundaries are where the world ends and you begin, and that's why they're important. Boundaries are essential to self-concept, and self-concept is essential to self-worth. Feeling like you deserve to wear what you want to wear, believe what you want to believe, live the way you want to live, and be called what you want to be called, these things are all essential to feeling good about yourself. Now, obviously, we all have budgetary and time constraints there, but you get what I mean, right? Within reason. A boundary is not a limit. Boundaries exist to stop us from hitting our limits, because limits are where we go splode or crash, right? Boundaries can be flexible. Limits aren't. And everyone's boundaries are different. And that's valid. There are some things that people call boundaries that aren't actually boundaries, but we'll get to that in a bit. I want to stay on what boundaries are for a bit. Like I talked about before, there are different types of boundaries, and some of us are great at setting some, but not great at others because of work we have to do or because of environmental circumstances that we can't control. Top 10 phrase, don't let problems that aren't your fault lead to mistakes that are. Some examples of type of boundaries are emotional boundaries, being able to stop things that hurt us and seek out things that make us happy. Physical boundaries. This includes our bodies as well as the space around us. Material boundaries. That's accessing and controlling our personal belongings. This includes money. Some people call these financial boundaries. Material boundaries are just more comprehensive. Of course, sexual boundaries. When we say yes to sex, when we say no to sex, and then receiving sexual attention that makes us feel good instead of bad. That's the importance of sexual boundaries. Then there's workplace boundaries, and I can hear you rolling your eyes. Yes, this one gets violated a lot. We've done episodes on toxic work environments, and part of the reason that workplace boundaries get so violated so much is time boundaries. How much time we're expected to be at work, for one thing. Time boundaries mean treating time like it's precious and that our time belongs to us to a certain extent. Yes, we have commitments. Yes, we have work responsibilities, but we deserve time that is just ours. We can say, I have to go. We can say, I need to not be late. Stuff like that. Boundaries are difficult, uniquely difficult, because no one starts with any. It's all learned and developed. When we're babies, we're dependent. Someone has to feed and clean us, right? When we're kids, we have to do what our parents tell us to do. Now, somewhere between the ages of 9 and 13, we're supposed to start separating from our parents in terms of I am an individual with individual stuff I like and things I want to do that my parents may not agree with. That figuring out stuff phase, which is why the wine mom circles love to complain about their teenagers. That always makes me kind of uncomfortable. Teenagers are teenagers. Defiance is a feature, not a bug. By around 23 years old, give or take, we're supposed to have the basics of adult decision-making down. But don't freak out if you don't, because a lot of people don't. And that is not their fault. This increasing focus on what we call helicopter parenting, protecting and safeguarding children in ways that deny them age-appropriate autonomy and agency, is leading to an increasing number of biological adults who are not emotional adults. Now factor in trauma. Now factor in neglect. And it is possible to be helicopter parented and neglected at the same time. No, really. I mean, okay, hats off to parents. It's a tough job. But too many parents make things about them and the perception the world has of them instead of checking in to see if their kids are really happy and thriving. And yes, your kid being happy matters. Now, for many of us, our parents are the biggest boundary busters in our lives, which is why I'm being tough on parents right now. Apologies, parents. Again, I know you have a tough job, but adults, when we hit adulting, parents get interesting. They show up without calling. They call us names we've told them we don't like. They pepper us with unsolicited advice. They keep important information from us. And they generally don't respect our time and space, sometimes our money, sometimes our parenting, sometimes even our work. And then we hear, I'm your mother, or I'm your father. Or Darth Vader, I am your father. You know, that was a bad Darth Vader. Let's pretend that didn't happen. As if I am your father is a blanket excuse to violate boundaries, even when James Earl Jones says it. And with intergenerational wealth, an increasing predictor of whether someone owns a home and adult children living at home longer, setting boundaries with your parents can seem impossible. It isn't, though. After the break, I'm going to show you how to determine what is and isn't a boundary when you set them and when your parents try to set a boundary, right? And how to set boundaries with those difficult parents. Question, comments, concerns, difficult everybody, but sorry parents, I'm beating up on you this week. Questions, comments, concerns, Liana at nottherapyshow.com. Nottherapyshow.com is my website. Fill out the mailing list, join, contact, all that stuff. Mouth not working, blah, blah. At Not Therapy Show on X, that's Twitter, Instagram, and Threads. Be right back, talking when boundaries go bad. The following program is a peer-to-peer advice show and does not diagnose mental health conditions. If you're seeking social services, please call or text 211 or go to 211.ca. We're back on It's Not Therapy. I'm still Liana Kersner. I'm still not a therapist, and we're still talking about boundaries, especially when boundaries go bad. It's unfortunate that as a culture, we suck at boundaries. We're generally bad at setting them, but we're also bad at recognizing them. We miss obvious boundaries, but we also insist we're just setting a boundary when we're actually trying to control another person's behavior. So what is and is not a boundary? Here's an example using two similar statements. The first is a boundary. The second is controlling. First statement. If you text me at work, I won't be able to respond until I'm finished my shift. That's a boundary. It's about what you will and will not do. Second statement. Don't text me while I'm at work. That's control. Another more contentious example. Stop yelling at me versus I'm happy to work this out when you're not yelling at me. Stop yelling at me is a demand, an understandable demand. I'm not saying never say it, right? When someone's yelling at you, you kind of panic, but still, definitionally, it is a demand. I'll work this out with you when you're not yelling at me is a statement of what you're willing to do, which is a boundary. You see how that works? Now, perfect is a lie. Stop trying to be perfect. We all mess this up sometimes. We all go to the don't yell at me because being yelled at sucks. But there's good, better, best here, right? And this is, of course, when a lot of people will say, I'm not yelling, often yelling that declaration that they're not yelling. If you have a habit of doing this, ask yourself why. Because the person is clearly letting you know that your voice is too loud or aggressive for their comfort. So what does being belligerent on top of that do? The answer is, there is an answer to this. I've asked people, because this quirks of human behavior fascinate me. People don't do things for no reason. So the answer to why go, I'm not yelling when someone says, stop yelling at me, that answer is often, I'm defending myself. Yeah, defending yourself against lowering your voice. Why is that so important to some people? A lot of boundary busting has its roots in anxiety and childhood neglect. People believe that the only way to get a person to listen is to make them listen. But you can't actually force someone to listen. That's definitely in trying to control other people territory. You may get someone to sit there and let you talk, but you can't make them listen, and you certainly can't make them understand. And what's the difference? One is communicating limits on your own behavior and reactions, right? The other is a directive. It's telling other person what to do. That is a demand. That is not a boundary. Again, people are probably feeling very anxious right now. And again, anxiety is a big reason that people bust boundaries. And I don't think we talk about this enough. Because a person having an intense anxiety response, they can't respect boundaries because they need to feel heard, right? I'm sure you've heard this. Or you felt it at some point in your life. And of course, this is very human. The need to feel heard is very human. But this is missing that this is a two-way street. That other people want to feel heard too. I know. Anxiety isn't logical. This is why, top 10 phrase, listen twice before you talk once. Feeling unheard is valid. Needing to stomp all over people and always having to go first, that's boundary busting. If you're frequently feeling unheard, you may not be communicating your own boundaries effectively. And that, unlike making people listen, is something you can control. Communicating your own boundaries is about what you do. Making someone listen is trying to control what someone else does. And everybody knows at least one person that just can't listen until they've exploded in emotion and gotten things off their chest because they need to feel heard. And it's true, they can't really listen. I've worked with people like this. I've dealt with people like this personally. It really is a can't. The unmet need is too strong. But that's not your fault or your responsibility unless you're the one with the unmet need. If you're not, you don't want to be that person. You may think, oh, they're getting all the attention, and that's true. But you don't want to be that person who is stomping all over other people because they don't know how to get their own emotional needs met. And for adults, that is an adult responsibility. Why? Because it's exhausting to be on the receiving end of, I need to feel heard, people. No matter how much you understand the need, no matter how much you understand where the unmet need comes from, eventually people have no choice but to pull away because people can't be the one to go into active listening mode before they're heard every single time. It just imbalances relationships too much when one person always needs to go first. But I need it. People protest. Aren't boundaries about getting needs met? Again, boundaries is what you are willing to do and accept. Demands are about what you expect other people to do for you. So you're demanding that you be heard first. Saying, I need to take a moment and calm down so that I can listen effectively. That's a boundary, right? And it might just be a minute. It might be, I need 20 minutes. I'll be back. But, again, I'm being rough, and I want people to recognize if you're walking around feeling that unheard, that's not healthy. Again, you need to communicate better, or you need to set better boundaries, or both. Other people have to be able to go first sometimes, even if you have anxiety. All people have anxiety. It is possible to lower the level of anxiety you're feeling. Now, in my work, I've personally found that this is a more common complaint in women about men, but it's certainly not exclusive to men, and it's certainly not exclusive to women complaining about this. Both men and women are encouraged to bottle up emotions by society. They're just different emotions that they're expected to bottle up, right? We know the stereotypes of women have to be happy and smiley all the time. Or pretty cry, no ugly crying, no angry, no. Whereas men, it's all angry. Anger is the only acceptable, in some cases, only acceptable negative emotion. But in other cases, that gruff is seen as the only acceptable emotion, period. Being happy, being joyous. Oh, it's unmanly. People who did these studies starting in the early 90s apparently had trouble getting straight men to respond because asking about emotional intimacy, the people taking the survey thought it was a test to see if they were gay. Based on that, it may not surprise you that men tend to have fewer friends than women starting in adolescence, and they report significantly lower levels of emotional intimacy within those friendships than women do, possibly because they're afraid of the gay. Or they're afraid of the girl. Opening up is seen as feminine and therefore weak, so men don't do it as often, so they feel less heard and understood. Now, this isn't to dig at men. These are societal pressures to consider. I own when I took a dig at parents. I owned when I took a dig at the people who need to feel heard. This is not a dig at men. These are real pressures that are put on men in society. And it isn't as if women have especially great friendships these days either. People-pleasing behavior is rampant in women, with more than half of women reporting they'd like to do less people-pleasing. And people-pleasing, just to be clear, we've done shows on people-pleasing, but people-pleasing isn't just wanting to make people happy. It's wanting to make people happy so they won't abandon you. It's a control lever. It's the need to be needed instead of a need to be heard that we get in men, right? So it's nobody's better or worse, not picking on men, not picking on women. It's different. Here's the problem. When you're adamant that people need to hear you or people need to have you around, you're taking away their ability to decide that they want to hear you or want to have you around. Yeah. So we've got a situation where the average man is so desperate to be heard that he's dominating conversations with those closest to him, often his spouse, partner. And the average woman is too people-pleasing to set a boundary that might lessen that with anyone, including other women. And so the average person is kind of to very much miserable. See how that all works? Wow, pretty depressing, huh? But that's the situation. That's why boundaries are important, because boundaries fix all that. So how do we go about setting boundaries, even with those challenging people? That's up next after this break. Liana at nottherapyshow.com is my email. Questions, comments, concerns, anything, please reach out or go to my website if Liana at nottherapyshow.com is too hard to remember. Nottherapyshow.com. Join our mailing list while you're there, or Not Therapy Show on X, Twitter, Instagram, and Threads. I've been doing more Instagram lately. I've been good. I hate it, but I'm proud of myself. Anyway, boundaries. More on boundaries. When boundaries are hard. When boundaries go bad. More on It's Not Therapy after this. The following program is a peer-to-peer advice show and does not diagnose mental health conditions. If you're seeking social services, please call or text 211 or go to 211.ca. We're back on It's Not Therapy. I'm still Liana Kersner. I'm still not a therapist, and we're still talking about boundaries, when boundaries go bad. Now, as I promised, we're going to talk about how to set and enforce those boundaries effectively, even with difficult people. Remember, boundaries are not demands. They're about your behavior, what you will tolerate, not what you're insisting another person do. Boundaries should be clear, specific, and as simple as possible. This makes them easier to enforce in a way that seems fair to a reasonable person. Now, I say fair to a reasonable person because, remember, this is about setting boundaries with difficult people. Difficult people are going to make it difficult to you. So if it seems like this is reasonable and they're flying off the handle, you may be mistaken, but go with your gut. Remember, as long as it's about your behavior, what you will tolerate, as opposed to try to make them do something, even if that means making them stop do something. That's, and that doesn't mean never say no or stop, right? Ideally, these conversations get easier. This is the last fence that's your boundary before your house that is your limit, right? So if you want to think about this stuff, a car's driving down the street. You hope they stop at the stop sign. That's somebody going stop. But if they don't, well, you hope the fence stops them, because otherwise, crash, they're going into your emotional house. That's how it works. Sometimes there is an opportunity to discuss boundaries in a quiet, calm moment, either before something happens or after. But sometimes you have to set a boundary immediately. And this is where I differ from therapists who get really, really nitpicky on this stuff. Because I'm not about therapeutic models. I'm not about the therapeutic framework. I'm about real life. And sometimes in real life, you gotta not let perfect be the enemy of the good. Remember, top 10 phrase, perfect is a lie. Stop trying to be perfect. That doesn't mean you don't try for enough. But I'd rather you set the boundary, even if it comes out too harsh at first. It's better than saying nothing. You can refine your approach later. You can apologize for it coming out the wrong way or the right way. Just, you let it go too long. This takes practice. You're not going to get it right away, but you have to start somewhere. Top 10 phrase, self-esteem cannot exist without self-compassion. Okay, exception to this, don't scream at your boss at work, okay? I mean, don't scream at anyone, but you have to be extra careful at work. Workplace boundaries are much trickier and depend very much on the corporate culture, which is why right off the top of the show, I'm like, workplace boundaries. Some people are going, what are those? If you don't believe you can set any boundaries at your job, any of them at all, look for a new job sooner rather than later. There's no harm in looking, but give it a chance. Try to set some small ones because, it's it's worth a try. But yeah, if you really can't set boundaries at your job, if you're getting work emails at 2 a.m. and 5 a.m. and 7 a.m. and 6 p.m. and 7 p.m. and so on, and there are workplaces that do this. Yeah, there is. Start looking for a new job. You're going to get sick, even if that sickness is your emotions. Question, comments, any feedback, Liana at nottherapyshow.com. Nottherapyshow.com is the website. Join the mailing list while you're there. Fill out the contact form, or at Not Therapy Show on X, that's Twitter, Instagram, and Threads. Now, a lot of people may have had abusive bosses, manipulative colleagues, and things have blown up really badly at work or with family. Work, family seems to be the two big sources of boundary busting, right? Because a friend, well, a lot of the times you can just end a friendship. Family's tougher that way, and everybody needs a job, right? But sometimes with friends too. In any case, just because you get a bad reaction when you try to set boundaries doesn't mean you did anything wrong. In fact, I'm going to keep beating on this. You probably will get a bad reaction the first few times you try to set boundaries. You'll possibly be accused of being too sensitive, being selfish. You'll hear something like, "That's just the way I am." People may even weaponize false boundaries against you out of spite or revenge. I've had people, they are so resentful of being told no that they just, "I won't talk to you unless you," they just really, really get their nose out of joint, and they start mirroring language, but it's really not about behavior they won't tolerate. It's trying to make me miserable. It's trying to control me. So set the boundary anyway. And if somebody behaves poorly, remember, it's about your behavior and what you will accept, not controlling the behavior of others. And some people still have trouble with the difference there. And I get that it takes some time to get your head around it. It takes a few tries to see, oh, right, I'm not telling the person to stop. They can keep doing it if they want. I'm just not going to be here to be on the receiving end of it. If they do, if they keep bringing my car back dirty, I'm not going to lend it to them anymore. If they keep losing, the clothes I lend them, I'm not going to lend them anymore. And, they might not take that well, but what's worth more, the bad reaction or that $300 dress that now has a red wine stain on it, right? Another way to think about it, another way to think about boundaries, if the idea of treating yourself the way you want to be treated, all that stuff. Boundaries help other people. You're telling people how to love you in a way that's going to make you feel loved. And people who care about you, really love you for you, they're going to cherish that information. I said to a family member who was trying to bust boundaries recently that love isn't just something you say. Love is something that you do. And I might have read that somewhere, but if I did, I don't remember. I came up with it spur of the moment, and I stand by it. The best way, Jeff Pereira was on the show talking about men's issues. He says the best way to demonstrate your intentions is to make sure your behavior's landing the way you intend, and if you're not getting the reaction you want, change your behavior. Love isn't just something that you say. Love is something that you do. It can't be all one way, the same way you can't go first every time. Because those first few runs shattering boundaries are going to be tough, and people are going to push you, guilt you, shame you, sometimes flatten out, threaten you. I'm not trying to scare you here. I'm trying to prepare you for what to expect, because when I first started setting boundaries, the reactions I got were explosive and incredibly shaming, and I was pushed back down into a very, very bad place for far too long. And I want that better for you. So again, I'm not trying to scare you, quite the opposite. What I'm trying to tell you is if you're getting a bad reaction, you're not necessarily doing anything wrong. In fact, the bad reaction might be because you're doing something right and a controlling person doesn't like it. Again, it's not always bad people. Some people are just trained badly. Some people are so bottled up with their own emotion that they can't listen twice before they talk once. So again, I'm just telling you the facts. People are not going to listen at first. If they do, great, awesome, I'm preparing you for the worst here so that if the worst happens, it's okay. This is a feature, not a bug. Liana said this was going to happen. Keep going. The question is, if somebody ignores your boundary, if someone goes too bad, then what? I find it best to set clear consequences for violating your boundaries when you state the boundary. An example of, if you're going to continue to yell, I'm going to hang up the phone. If you continue to swear at me, I'm going to block you. If you keep calling me that, I'm going to have to leave. If you don't get me your article by 5 p.m. Thursday, we can't include it. The very important thing here is actually follow through. I took so much heat on an anthology I did. Not Mecha Jesus Wrestling with Gods. Wrestling with Gods was the anthology that I took heat on for this. Not Mecha Jesus. Mecha Jesus is awesome. February 29th, Lillian Smith Library. Join us there. I'm stoked for it. Can you tell? But anyway, when I was editing Wrestling with Gods, a fairly prominent author submitted late. And there was real pressure to accept it because it was a prominent author. And we rejected other people for not following the call to submissions. There was no apology. No, I misread the deadline. It was, here it is. If he'd been contrite, if it was a mistake, that he owned, it would have been a different story. But I read it as this is just arrogance. This is him thinking the rules don't apply to him. So I'm like, no. Now the story wasn't worth making it in. But on principle, even if it had been, no. There are rules for a reason. And I want to respect the people who respect my time and my deadlines and our ability to get through the pile of open submissions on time. Somebody might think that this is unreasonable. I don't think it is. And none of the consequences I gave, I'm going to hang up, I'm going to block you, I'm going to have to leave, we can't include it, right? These aren't unreasonable. But some people won't accept them. They'll act victimized, gossip behind your back, and that's when the real consequences kick in. This is when things get really good. Because if somebody cuts you up behind your back enough, a third party will eventually ask you what happened, and then you can tell them the real story of how you set a boundary. It's happened recently. More on that later. But, somebody fafoed. Can't say that word can't say the first word on the radio there, but the next three are, and found out the boundary buster got busted. Better yet, you've avoided a whole lot of future unpleasantness, by limiting contact with that person who is toxic and backstabbing and best minimized in your life, even at work. It's so good when they get caught at work. Oh, it's glorious. Now, some consequences are not okay. Not every consequence is okay. I'm going to call you every 5 minutes until you stop ignoring me. Well, that's not a fair boundary, because that's demanding someone do something instead of just making it clear what you'll do in response to their behavior. If you don't like being ignored, well, there's something you can do about that. You're going to stop contacting them. Maybe they want to ghost you, but you have to respect that somebody doesn't want to talk to you. Boundaries go both ways. Similarly, if you don't stop contacting me, I'll contact your work and lie to get you fired. Also not okay, for hopefully obvious reasons. Boundaries aren't threats. Boundaries are your you will lose access to me point. And that reality, that loss of access is why setting boundaries with family is so difficult. We're all fed this stuff about family is always there for each other and stuff about duty and obligation. And yeah, those are just guilt trips. Learn from my mistakes. Family is not exempt from boundaries. When you live with someone, though, boundaries are a unique challenge, especially now when people are packing more and more people into smaller and smaller spaces with only one bathroom to make ends meet. That's the reality of our times. But that's what makes setting small boundaries early so important. Work the simple stuff out in advance so there are fewer flare-ups and everyone knows what's expected of them and agrees to those expectations. And that's the nice thing about sitting down and having an in advance, a preemptive conversation about boundaries. It doesn't have to be high conflict. It can be a negotiation where you work things out together. Even put it on paper somewhere. If you have to, make a game out of it, do little happy face doodles, whatever. Make sure everyone's clear. That's really, really helpful for people, especially people that aren't used to living with roommates. For this to happen, though, everyone involved has to be grown up enough to work things out. And sometimes someone just won't be. And when you think about it, it's better to find that out sooner as opposed to later as well. Now, yeah, you can do everything right again and things still will go spectacularly wrong. You can be, nice but not a pushover and people won't appreciate it. You can't control other people. And even though, like I said off the top 10 phrase, people don't have to like your boundaries, but they do have to respect them. Again, that's a reminder to myself because that has not happened so very often. So when we come back after our final break, I'm going to tell you a story to something that happened recently. The worst reaction to setting boundaries I've experienced in a while. But it has a happy ending. It was still the right thing to do. And it worked out, but it was spectacular fireworks in the short term. I'm going to tell you this, so I'm not telling you to do anything I haven't done. You're not going to want to miss this, but Liana at nottherapyshow.com. That's my email if you have any questions, comments, concerns, anything like that. Liana at nottherapyshow.com. Or if you can't figure out how to spell my first name, just go to my website, nottherapyshow.com. Join our mailing list, fill out the contact form. Twitter, Instagram, Threads, at Not Therapy Show. Drama story time. When we come back, when boundaries go bad and it's not therapy. The following program is a peer-to-peer advice show and does not diagnose mental health conditions. If you're seeking social services, please call or text 211 or go to 211.ca. We're back and it's the therapy. I'm still Liana Kersner. I'm still not a therapist. Okay, so this is a totally true story. Perhaps a few details sanded off to protect the innocent and the guilty, but, also storytelling, but, 95%, 100% accurate. Okay. That was funnier than I expected it to be. 95%, 100% accurate. I like that. But, so here we go. True story. Picture it. Tirana, 2024. Put a Golden Girls flourish on it. Anyway, there was drama with some people that I occasionally collaborate with. I had a vague awareness of it because someone did a drama stream airing the dirty laundry about it, and I don't like that behavior. I find it unpleasant. I find it distasteful. I can't tell you if it's morally wrong. I just know it gives me that chewing tinfoil feeling because people trust me with stuff. So it just goes against my every instinct for someone to put somebody on blast by name, with something that was just a personal disagreement, ratcheted up to 11 and then monetized to make money off the drama. It's not the way I like to do things. And one of the people involved at that was bugging me to do a content collaboration with them. And so I said that, well, when can you do it? When can you do it? He said. And I was like, well, I don't like the way this other person is being treated. So, I'm not going to do it until it's resolved. And he started saying, no, there's another side to it. And the next thing I know, I get this email from a third person, second woman, who I hadn't heard from in months. This happened this month, and I haven't heard from her. I looked it up in my email from October. She was like, I miss you. I miss your adorableness. And it was mostly, the person I thought was treated badly. Oh, this, that. You get the really vague insinuations of poor behavior. So, to recap so far, I set a boundary. I didn't want to get in the middle of drama. Oh yeah, I actually told him that. I said, I don't want to get in the middle of drama, so I'm not going to do it until this is resolved. Now, do you notice that I said, I don't like the way she's being treated? Not, you are this and you are that. Just, I don't like it. And I don't want to get in the middle of a dramatic situation, so I'm not going to do it until it's resolved. Not never. Just not while it's a mess. And this guy, instead of accepting that, ran to this third party who came in hot. And I didn't cave. I didn't play nice. And that was a choice. That was a choice because, again, I did not appreciate how the first woman was being treated. I thought it was wrong. And I have that right. And I said, wow, I haven't heard from you in months. And I explained my issues with the treatment. And I said, I don't care what, the first woman did. Putting a friend on blast in public is wrong. And so this second woman proceeded to put me on blast in emails. It started the night of, it was like Friday, Saturday, and it went through until like Sunday. But it was like evening into the morning where I finally, routed the email to junk. While this was happening, the guy who went behind my back to this third party and multiple other people, with a not 95%, 100% accurate story. And I said, dude, call her off. This was between us. She shouldn't have even been involved. And again, yes, that was a request. I wasn't insisting he do it. But instead of going, yeah, you're right, I'll tell her to back off. I'm not saying that was a boundary. That was a request, not a boundary. But instead of taking the reasonable request, he came back with this lengthy, maybe you should block me. I don't deserve friends, blah, blah, blah. So I blocked him. Because at this point, there was no authenticity in the conversation. Now, I knew he'd gone to somebody before this. So I went to this third woman saying, here's what I said. Just in case he comes to you again. Saying I blocked him. Sure enough, he did. Remember I said the boundary buster gets busted? Busted. So now that person knew the truth. And while this was going on, the emails were still coming in fast and furious from this second woman who couldn't accept me saying, I don't agree with what you did. I think under no circumstances do you monetize drama with a friend on a live stream while the friend is at work and getting messages saying, do you know she's talking about you? Like, put yourself in that situation, right? I just felt like if I didn't set a boundary on that, first of all, when someone does that, they're not just doing it to one person. These two were fairly close. So to my analysis of the situation, that was the person who did it going, no one's safe. If she'll do it to somebody she considered very close, she'll do it to anyone. And because I have this show, because I work with clients, I am not interested in that. Best to set the boundary now. Best to have the blow up now. Hopefully it will stay in public instead of going, it'll stay in private instead of going public. And she has made comments about this, that, and the next thing. She's obviously told people, or the original guy has told people. But the point is that the more people ask questions, because, I have a very lengthy email trail of, again, doing what I said. Okay, she needs to feel heard. What are you looking for from me here? What do you want from me? And it was always, I want nothing, blah, 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 more bile, right? Predictable. Got the number at this point. But anyone who asks, I have email receipts. And anyone who saw it was like, my eyes are tired. And then they approached her. And then they got the same reaction. And so slowly, one by one, people saw the truth. The boundary buster got busted. And in a non-toxic environment, that's what eventually happens. And that's why it's very important to set boundaries, because not only do you find out who your friends are, the truth comes out and you can hold your head up high. Because even though that person got upset, and multiple people got upset on that one, you did nothing wrong. And the truth came out. And the nice thing is, we all got to see who our friends really are. And I did for somebody what I would want done for me, which is stand up when something just isn't right. All's well that ends well, right? And we got to end this show. Liana at nottherapyshow.com. My email, or just go to my website, nottherapyshow.com. If you can't remember how to spell my name, it's Lian as in Nancy A, but nottherapyshow.com is the website. Fill out the contact form, join our mailing list, or social media, Twitter, X, Instagram, Threads, at nottherapyshow. And your crazy is only a problem if it's hurting you. You see how I landed that? That was smooth. That makes up from some of those other clunky phrases earlier. Till next time, bye.